The story begins on a bright summer day at the Avengers mansion in New York City. Jarvis was pouring a cup of coffee for the Wasp, while Captain Britain was enjoying her lunch. Ant-Man asks Hawkeye who is his favorite woman that he could never have, and Clint says Madame Hydra is very sexy, especially with her green hair and green leather. She-Hulk listened in on the conversations and called him a pig, but Clint says he can't help but have a thing for her, maybe because of all the green. Their friendly banter was cut short when an unidentified person destroyed one of the walls and entered the compound. It was Jack of Hearts, a former Avenger who was killed some time ago, but something was very wrong. He looked barely alive, resembling a zombie, but managed to speak and say he was sorry. Then out of nowhere, his body exploded, destroying a big portion of the mansion and instantly killing Ant-Man. The other Avengers recovered unharmed, but they had no idea what just happened. They went outside and found a giant crater where Jack of Hearts exploded, but there was no sign of Ant-Man. The only thing left of him was his skinless hand. Meanwhile, across town, Iron Man is addressing the United Nations in his capacity as U.S. Secretary of Defense, but he gets distracted when he sees the delegate from Latveria. Tony loses control and goes all out on the delegate, calling the Latveria leader a terrorist and saying they need to unite their forces and wipe that country off the face of the map. He was taken off stage and he tells Wanda he has no idea what came over him. He swears he is not drunk, saying he has been clean for many months now. Wanda gets an alert on her phone, the Avengers Code White, the highest priority call asking all available members to come to the mansion. S.H.I.E.L.D. had already surrounded the mansion and was securing the area when Captain America noticed something in the sky. The Vision was piloting one of the Quinjets and was flying towards them, but he wasn't slowing down. He crashes inside the mansion, creating yet another explosion, but this time, nobody was injured. The Vision emerges from the fire and says he is sorry, but he no longer controls his body. And just like with Jack of Hearts, his face looked different. He opens his mouth and spits out several metal balls while the captain asks everyone to fall back. These metal balls transform into many Ultron-shaped robots that instantly attack the Avengers. Captain America leads the attack and jumps on one of the drones, managing to take it down. He then uses his shield to decapitate it, telling everyone to go for their heads. Hawkeye, the Falcon, and She-Hulk followed the captain's orders and took out more of the drones. But something wasn't right, and She-Hulk began to lose control, taking her rage out on Vision and prompting her to ask him why Ant-Man was killed. But Vision was already dead and couldn't reply, so she broke his body in half. But she didn't stop there and continued her attacks on the other Avengers, throwing a truck on top of the captain. Eventually, Iron Man arrives and knocks her out with a strong punch right to her jaw. The aftermath of this whole incident was devastating. Ant-Man and the Vision were both dead, while Captain Britain, She-Hulk, and the Wasp were all hospitalized. Tony Stark believes that everything that happened today is connected, including what happened to him at the United Nations, but Hank Pym doesn't believe him, saying he was there and Tony was drunk. Tony used to be an alcoholic, but says he stopped drinking, and he was sober today, but the others didn't trust him, so he flew away. The captain wanted to return to the mansion to investigate the site for possible clues, trying to make sense of everything that happened today, but he was greeted with a shocking sight. The Avengers SOS that was sent out earlier today was heard by all the heroes in the country, and they all responded. Black Panther says they were all Avengers at one point in time and they all came to offer their support, but Colonel Fury wasn't too thrilled about this. He says that the mansion is a crime scene and they are all interfering with possible evidence and asks them to leave. Out of nowhere, a giant Kree ship appeared in the sky and launched an attack on New York. As if this day wasn't bad enough, the heroes were now faced with an impending Kree invasion, and everyone sprung into action. Luckily, all of the heroes were gathered in New York City, and Hawkeye says they picked the wrong day to screw with the Avengers. Clint goes on a solo rampage against the Kree, killing as many as he could with his bow, but he was shot in the back with a powerful energy blast. He says he doesn't want to go down like a coward, and jumps on one of the Kree soldiers that had a jetpack. Together they launch themselves into the air and fly directly into the giant spaceship, causing a giant explosion that breaks the ship in half. This forces the Kree soldiers to retreat, but sadly Hawkeye was killed in the explosion. But something wasn't right again. The spaceship wasn't made out of metal, but something none of them could explain. That's when Doctor Strange arrives and says the nature of these attacks is magic, and everything that happened today is connected. Many months ago, the Wasp and Wanda Maximoff were enjoying a beautiful day beside the pool, and Janet says she thought she was pregnant because her period was late. Luckily, it was a false alarm, because it's literally impossible for an Avenger to have children, and Wanda thought she could have two. Wanda asks her what she meant by that, but Janet quickly changed the subject, saying she's going inside because she needs to pee. But Wanda knew she was hiding something from her. Doctor Strange says that Wanda was behind the attack today because she is the only one strong enough to do this. She is Magneto's daughter, and she was born with incredible powers that she did not earn, powers she never fully understood or was able to control. Her powers allow her to change reality, and even create things that aren't real. She wanted to have children, but because she couldn't have them naturally, she created them. With help from Agatha Harkness, they were able to wipe her memory and make her forget that tragic event. But every time Wanda uses her powers to alter reality, she loses control over her mind. Strange leads the heroes to where Wanda was hiding, and together they confront her. But Wanda created villains and former allies and forced them to fight each other. She used her powers to create her children once again, and watched as the heroes attacked each other. But Doctor Strange confronts her and asks her to stop this madness because she is hurting her friends and herself. She refused to back down, saying she won't allow him to take her children away from her ever again. Strange powered up and used the Eye of Agamotto to show her the truth, saying she will stop this madness, and that these magics are not hers to abuse. This causes Wanda to black out and drop from the sky, but the captain ran towards and caught her before she hit the ground. Because her mind was already in a delicate place, Strange was able to put her to sleep, and Magneto came to pick up his daughter. Magneto says that Xavier was right. She was behind all these attacks, and he is sorry. The heroes ask him where he plans on taking her, but he didn't say anything and just flew away together. The heroes gathered inside the Avengers mansion to remember the fallen heroes. Ant-Man, Vision, and Hawkeye all lost their lives because Wanda's mind deteriorated so much to the point where she was a danger to the entire world. She-Hulk blames herself for killing the Vision, but Janet says it wasn't her fault. His body was already destroyed by Wanda when she broke him in half. Sadly, after everything that happened at the United Nations, Tony Stark lost all of his credibility and support inside the government and says he doesn't have the funds to support the Avengers anymore. He was literally using half of his fortune to keep the Avengers alive. Keeping the mansion running wasn't cheap. The Avengers agree to disband and begin talking about their future plans away from this place. Hank Pym asks Iron Man what was his best moment as an Avenger, if he had to pick just one moment. Tony says the best thing they ever did was getting together in the first place. He was still getting used to the armor and got to go on incredible adventures with his fellow teammates, including Hulk. The Wasp's greatest moment was when they found Captain America still frozen, saying they found him in the perfect moment when the country needed him the most. The rest of the heroes each remember some of their greatest moments spent as an Avenger, but sadly, all good things come to an end. They have one final dinner and Captain America gives a big toast in honor of all of their fallen Avengers, including Hawkeye, Ant-Man, Vision, Jack Hart, Swordsman, Dr. Druid, and many others. However, what followed next was a beautiful moment that none of them really expected. The people of New York City surrounded the Avengers mansion to pay their respects to the group of heroes that time and time again sacrificed their own lives to save others. The story begins with a woman crying and screaming as loud as she could because the pain was unbearable. Wanda is surrounded by her friends and family while she gives birth to 2 beautiful baby boys. Doctor Strange congratulates her while Vision says, "This is a glorious day, but something isn't right," and someone asks her to put it back. It was Professor X who tells Wanda that she has no children and that there is no one inside this room beside him and her. She made it all up using her powers. Wanda drops to the ground and starts crying while everything in the room disappears and reveals the gruesome truth that they were all alone. She is overwhelmed with grief, saying, "I killed them. I killed the Avengers. I killed my husband." Magneto visits the professor and asks him how it went, because he heard the screaming. Charles is worried and says that every time his daughter uses her powers to alter reality, she loses more of her grasp on reality, and they can't control her for much longer. Magneto blames himself for ruining his children's lives, saying that because of him and his war against the humans, he destroyed whatever hope they ever had for a decent life. He levitates and slowly flies away into the ruins of what was once the beautiful nation of Genosha. The story then jumps to New York City with Miss Marvel, the Falcon, and Wonder Man arriving at the Avengers Tower. The 3 of them are curious as to why they were called to come here, and remark it would have been much easier to fly than walk. But they weren't the only ones who were asked to come to the Avengers Tower. The X-Men also arrive and are greeted by a shocking sight. Every member of the Avengers team was waiting for them, and in the middle of all of them was Professor X. Back on Genosha, Wanda's brother, Pietro, argues with his father, saying that the Avengers and the X-Men have gathered in New York City to talk about the fate of his sister. He says they want to kill her and asks his father to do something about it. But Magneto was out of options and hasn't got a clue what to do with his daughter. Emma Frost is straightforward and tells everyone that they need to kill her. If she keeps altering reality and loses control like she did 6 months ago, she might put the entire world in danger. But Captain America opposes this decision, saying that there is always another way. But the professor isn't so sure about this. Not this time. Even Doctor Strange has no way of helping her, saying that there is nothing in the mystic arts that could help her, but he is still researching. The captain agrees with Doctor Strange and says they should continue working on finding a solution, but Emma Frost says they should vote. She is worried because if the people found out that a mutant killed the beloved Avengers 6 months ago and she was out of control, the world would turn on them even more. The captain remarks that Wanda is an Avenger, and it's ultimately the Avengers' decision. The Avengers vote to keep her alive for now, and Wolverine asks how many more of them need to die before they snap back to reality. They do decide, however, to go to Genosha and talk to Wanda to see for themselves if the situation is really this bad. They travel to the island but are greeted only by the ruins of what used to be a beautiful, safe place for mutants. The professor leads them to the building where Wanda was sleeping, but the place was abandoned. She wasn't there anymore. Someone moved her, but Emma Frost senses she is nearby. The heroes fly towards an abandoned church that was in ruins, while Doctor Strange remarks that every time Wanda uses her powers, she creates mystic patterns, but this time he wasn't feeling anything here. Just like in the building, the place looks abandoned, and there is nobody here. Out of nowhere, a powerful white light engulfed everyone and everything, and there was a moment of complete silence. Moments later, Peter Parker wakes up in his bedroom apartment, but something was very off. Someone was sleeping next to him, but it wasn't Mary Jane. He was married to Gwen Stacy, even though she was supposed to be dead. On the other side of New York City, Captain America was now over 100 years old and leaves his home, while some kids recognize him. Something happened on Genosha, and everyone's lives have changed. Scott and Emma Frost were now married and had just woken up. They eat breakfast together and talk about their lives, while having no memories of their previous lives or how they got here. This world was vastly different from the normal world. Here the mutants were the majority and controlling the world, while the normal humans were the oppressed people and called sapiens. In this reality, Wonder Man was a very famous movie star, while Miss Marvel was a superhero catching bad guys. Kitty Pryde is a junior high history teacher, teaching young mutants who was the first ever mutant. Luke Cage was just a normal human, but an underworld crime boss living in Hell's Kitchen. Wolverine has a nightmare where he is haunted by memories of his past traumas while he was still in the Weapon X program, but he wakes up to a beautiful sight. A beautiful redhead was beside him in bed wishing him good morning, but he panics and attacks her. Logan is now part of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s elite Red Guard and is romantically involved with his fellow agent, Mystique. He was flying inside a giant helicarrier several miles above New York City, but unlike his fellow X-Men, something was different about him. Logan remembered everything. All of his past memories were still intact, and he remembers what happened on Genosha. He wonders what happened to the professor, thinking that Magneto and Wanda were behind these events, and decides to jump off the helicarrier, dropping all the way from the sky and crashing on one of the buildings below. The newspapers that day talked about an event that was happening this weekend, where the House of Magnus was organizing a gala to celebrate 30 years of freedom from oppression by sapiens. Logan steals a bike and goes to the Avengers Tower, hoping to talk to them and tell them the truth about this world. But he was stopped by his fellow Red Guard agents. They think that something bad must have happened to him and want to take him back to the helicarrier, but he doesn't want to go with them and runs away. The agents chase him down and he runs on the street and gets on his bike. He jumps over several cars and is about to crash when someone appears right in front of him. The person opens his giant cloak and takes Logan into a dark place, away from the streets and emerging in Hell's Kitchen. Luke Cage was waiting for him, saying he needs to calm down and crush the tracker on the back of his head. Otherwise, the Red Guard agents will find them. Hawkeye was on edge and didn't trust Logan, so he shoots him point blank with an arrow, destroying the tracker and thinking that he killed him. But Logan recovers after being unconscious for over 30 seconds, but the tracker did its job and led the Sentinels to their hideout. In this world, the Sentinels were hunting down humans and not mutants, and the room was filled with sapiens. Cloak reacted fast and moved as many people as he could to another location, far away from the Sentinels, but sadly he didn't manage to take everyone and many people were left behind. Logan tells Luke Cage the truth about this world and what happened on Genosha, and he believes him. Cage says that a girl visited him yesterday and told him the exact same thing. Somehow, a little girl named Layla Miller also knows that this world is fake and can show the truth to others. Logan believes that the only reason he remembers the world as it used to be is because his memory was wiped so many times before, and maybe his body found a way to counteract the effects. He wants to show the other X-Men the truth and takes Layla and the other people to Cyclops and Emma Frost's apartment, but nobody was home. When Emma returned, Layla showed her the truth, reliving all of her past memories and remembering what happened on Genosha. Emma was furious and blames Magneto, thinking he found a way to convince his daughter to change the world and wants to kill both of them. Logan agrees, but they need more help. Next on the list was Cyclops, and he was ambushed by Layla just as he returned home, forcing him to remember the world as it used to be. Next on the list was Peter Parker, who has a harder time dealing with the truth, because in this world he lives a perfect life with his child and Gwen Stacy. Peter was furious at Wanda and her father for doing this and vowed to kill both of them, but Logan told him to get in line. He's not the only one. Eventually, most of the heroes were shown the truth and they gathered once again to discuss their plan of attack. But the Red Guard, still S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, were still chasing Logan down. Layla made all of them remember their previous lives, and everyone wanted revenge now. The Red Guard agents bring the heroes on board one of the helicarriers, and Emma Frost uses her powers to hide themselves amongst the crew. She then mind-controlled the captain and forced him to set a course for Genosha, where the House of M was hosting the prestigious gala event. The first guest to arrive on Genosha was King T'Challa of the African Commonwealth of Wakanda, followed by none other than Victor Von Doom, the King of Latveria. Princess Ororo of Kenya was next, closely followed by King Namor of the Kingdom of Atlantis. All of the guests were greeted by Magneto and his family, his son Pietro, his daughter Lorna, his 2 grandchildren, and of course Wanda Maximoff sitting on his right. Out of nowhere, one of the giant sentinels that belonged to S.H.I.E.L.D. started to dive towards Magneto, but he was able to stop it moments before impact. All of the heroes launched their attack, using their combined powers and strength to attack Magneto and his children. While everyone was busy fighting, in another part of the island, Emma Frost, Layla, and Cloak were on a mission to find Professor Xavier and bring back his memories of the real world. But they were shocked to find a tombstone with his name written all over it. But Cloak went underground and found no coffin, saying that the professor wasn't even there. Back in the main room, She-Hulk was encouraging her teammates to keep fighting and not give up. They needed to win this fight one way or another. During the attack, Wanda was hit with a powerful blast of energy and her body began to disintegrate, prompting Pietro to scream in horror. But Doctor Strange noticed a strange light in one of the towers and goes to investigate. He finds Wanda playing inside with both of her children. She greets him and says that the person from the main hall wasn't her true self. She would never abandon her children for a stupid gala. Strange asks her if she created Layla Miller to bring them here, but she doesn't even know who that is. He wants to know what happened to Professor Xavier and how Magneto convinced her to change the world like this. Wanda tells Steven the truth, that it wasn't her father who convinced her to change the world. It was actually her brother Pietro. He knew the X-Men and the Avengers wanted to kill her because her powers were too dangerous, and she was losing her mind and wanted to protect her. Pietro asked his sister to change the world so that everyone can be happy and live a perfect life, including them. Emma Frost tells Doctor Strange to ask what happened to the professor because they couldn't find him anywhere. But before she could answer, Hawkeye shot her in the back with his arrow. Barton was angry because Wanda killed him several months ago when she lost control the first time and demanded to know why she did it. But one of Wanda's children begins to scream and kills Barton once again, disintegrating his body completely. Wanda tells Steven that she didn't mean to do it and that she only wanted to protect her children. She can't control her powers anymore. Meanwhile, Magneto finds Emma Frost and Layla hiding and asks them why they are bothering his family. But Layla shows him the truth, bringing back all of his memories. Magneto had no idea that Pietro convinced Wanda to change the world in his name and comes back enraged. He loses control and attacks his son using pieces of metal from the Sentinel, killing him in the attack. Wanda begins to scream her brother's name and flies directly towards him, removing her father's mouth to prevent him from talking. She uses her powers and brings back her brother from the dead and then hugs him tightly. Wanda tells her father that Pietro only wanted for everyone to be happy and blames everything that happened to them on him. She calls her father arrogant, saying that just because they are mutants, he thinks they are better than everyone else and deserve to rule. She gave him this world, and even when he got what he wanted, he was still a horrible man. Wanda says, they are not gods, but freaks, mutants, and he chose the mutants over his own children. And then Wanda uttered 3 words, no more mutants. She started powering up and everyone prepared for the worst, expecting her to lose control and do something drastic. What followed next was a powerful explosion that annihilated this world completely, and everything was engulfed in a white light once again. Moments later, Layla Miller wakes up in her bedroom apartment alone and opens the window to take a fresh breath of air. Peter Parker wakes up in the Avengers Tower while Mary Jane drinks her coffee next to his bed, but he was sad because he missed Gwen Stacy. The Avengers organize a meeting once again to discuss what just happened. Even though everything seemed to be back to normal, not everyone remembered what happened. Iron Man can't remember anything, and Miss Marvel is just happy that things are back to normal. But Doctor Strange arrives and says, not quite. Back at Xavier's school for gifted youngsters, Emma Frost wakes up outside in the grass. She runs inside, passing the other X-Men, running towards the basement directly where Cerebro was located. She goes inside and puts on the headset and begins to cry in shock. Cerebro was created to locate mutant activity all over the world. but the map only shows just a few bright lights. Cyclops and Beast ask Emma to search for Wanda and Professor Xavier, but she can't find them anywhere in the world. The mutant population used to be in the millions, but now all of them just disappeared from the map. But they weren't dead either, just not mutants anymore. All of the students at the school were in great shock after discovering that they had completely lost their powers and were just normal human children now. Emma doesn't know if Wanda just deleted the mutant gene from everyone, or if she just suppressed the mutation. Xavier would know what this is, but he was missing. Pretty soon, the news traveled all over the world, with news stations from across the planet reporting the same thing, that most of the mutants had lost their powers, but nobody knows why. The X-Men go back to Genosha in hopes of finding Wanda hiding there, but they only find Magneto wandering the ruins alone. Wolverine jumps on top of him and asks where his daughter is, but he was just a normal man now after losing his powers and had no idea what happened to Wanda. He had no clue what happened to the professor or his son either, and Rogue asks everyone to let him go, saying what happened isn't his fault. Wolverine says he deserves every second of the rest of his crappy sapien life and vows to kill both of his children if he ever finds them. But Wanda Maximoff was still alive, wandering the streets of a marketplace somewhere in a distant and remote village, searching for food. Dr. Henry Pym gives an interview and talks about what just happened, saying that everyone around the world just witnessed the extinction of an entire species, and this will be sure to have an impact on the entire world and ecosystem. Sir Isaac Newton said that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So what will be the reaction to this tragic event? The story begins inside a quiet little church, where many people have gathered to attend the funeral of a young mutant who was killed recently in a bizarre accident. Among these people were even the X-Men like Wolverine, Nightcrawler, Emma Frost, Cyclops, Beast, and Professor Xavier. The kid's family takes the coffin to the grave, and everyone gathers around to say their final goodbyes. Professor X can't help but listen in on people's thoughts and hears what everyone is thinking about. The young boy wasn't even a part of the X-Men, but after Wanda Maximoff destroyed the mutant gene on M-Day, the mutant population was decimated, going from tens of millions of mutants around the world to just under 200 mutants in total. Mutant lives mattered now more than ever, and each new death was devastating. Cyclops talks to the boy's father and thanks him for allowing his fellow X-Men to pay their respects. However, the father was annoyed by this and said his son was just a number to them, just another mutant name they could cross off the list of barely 200 mutants left alive in the entire world. Cecily Kincaid is curious to know how the boy died, but everyone was vague about the subject. Nightcrawler tells her he was killed in a car accident at a busy intersection, a very mundane and ordinary death. She wishes she could punch him in the face for getting himself killed in such a dumb way, when there are fewer than 200 mutants left in the entire world. An old man intrigues Professor X because he can't read his mind, but it turns out that it is actually Sebastian Shaw in disguise. Shaw says he didn't know the boy, but felt that his death deserved to be marked in some way. Multiple Man asks Beast why nobody is talking about breeding programs to increase the mutant numbers again, but McCoy tells him it's because there aren't enough of them left to have sufficient genetic material to repopulate. The mutant race is basically extinct, and there is nothing left to do. It's just a matter of time now. Logan tells Scott that it takes a situation like this, where you look death in the face, to make you appreciate just how precious life is. The events that led to the downfall of the mutant population began some time ago on Genosha, where Wanda Maximoff changed the entire world into something else. The X-Men fought to change it back to normal, and they succeeded, but at what cost? In the end, Wanda uttered 3 words, barely loud enough to be heard.
No more mutants.
Some mutants died that day when they lost their powers out of nowhere, but most of them survived and were now just normal people without any special powers. Wanda made the mutant gene disappear as if it never existed. Beast took it upon himself to try and find a solution to the problem and asked for help from some of the brightest minds on the planet, including Mr. Fantastic and Iron Man, but without any luck. He then went searching all around the world for others to help him, but everyone turned him down, including Dr. Doom, MODOK, Pandemic, Sugarman, and even Mr. Sinister. Eventually, he climbed one of the highest mountains in the world in search of the High Evolutionary and found him inside a giant fortress. However, Professor Wyndham tells him the same thing, that what Wanda did is magic, and there is no way to reverse it unless he finds Wanda herself. He tells Beast to accept the truth and not waste his time, but Beast refuses to accept the truth and visits Dr. Kavita Rao, a mutant geneticist. She created a cure for mutants that turns them back into normal people, but what good is a cure with no one left to use it on? She gives him access to samples of this cure and wishes him good luck. Beast finds an old abandoned camp called Neverland, which was part of the Weapon X program many years ago. He finds hundreds of files and information on mutants that were kept prisoners there. This place was nothing more than a torture camp where mutants were experimented on, and hundreds lost their lives. But Beast was not alone there. Dark Beast shows up and says he wants to help. Dark Beast is a twisted, murderous, inhumane, and sadistic genius who comes from another Earth, a world that was ruled by Apocalypse. He was his most valuable geneticist, experimenting on mutants and devoted to creating the fittest beings for Apocalypse. McCoy knew what Dark Beast was capable of and was reluctant to work with him, but he had no choice. Dark Beast brings him up to date with everything he was working on and makes McCoy relive his most recent memories and witness horrific and despicable things. Together they arrive at an abandoned nuclear plant, but inside they find an entire hidden base called Black Womb. This place was even more despicable than the last, where people used to experiment on mutant babies. They find old video files and pictures of the horrible things that used to happen there, and Beast says that even though he wants to save the mutant race, he'd rather die than do anything like that, and he'll make sure to kill Dark Beast as well. Mr. Sinister told Dark Beast about this place, and that there is another secret section deeper inside. This place was under SHIELD surveillance ever since the project had shut down, and it was suspicious that nobody was there to greet them. But when they enter the secret room, they find all the SHIELD soldiers butchered and hanged for display. Somehow Sinister came there before them and left them a present, an old robot programmed to kill anyone on sight. They quickly deal with the robot, but the place was another dead end. The servers had been cleaned dry by Sinister, who took all the information for himself. The two beasts continue their work and analyze the bodies of several mutants who were depowered, but they all have the same thing in common. The mutant gene is completely missing from their DNA. Beast comes up with an idea and visits Forge in Dallas. All the heroes from alternate timelines retained their powers on M-Day, including Bishop, Cable, the Sugar Man, Marvel Girl, and Dark Beast. Forge built a machine that combines mutant-detecting Cerebra technology with time travel. He then used readings from artifacts that came from various futures as a baseline to scan those timelines. But the results were shocking. Either these futures no longer exist, or they do, and there are no more mutants in them. This only angers Beast even more, who refuses to accept the truth and leaves. Later, he and Dark Beast visit Lucinda Guthrie and ask her for a favor. They want to take gene samples from her. Even though Lucinda is a normal human, she is the mother of several mutants that were part of the X-Men, and Beast hopes that her DNA has traces of the unexpressed X gene. While the two of them are talking, Dark Beast tricks one of her kids into drinking a blue serum, saying it will give him superpowers again. The serum is dangerous, however, and the young boy falls to the ground unconscious. This prompts McCoy to attack Dark Beast, and the two engage in a brutal confrontation. Lucinda surprises Dark Beast from behind and shoots him in the arm, and then McCoy knocks him to the ground unconscious. Beast says he is sorry for causing her family harm, and leaves again empty-handed. Now desperate and running out of options, Beast visits the Sanctum Sanctorum of Doctor Strange and asks him for help. Strange decides to show him something: the effects of Wanda's actions and the repercussions of her magic. McCoy asks Strange if the spell can be reversed, but he says that the spell has spread across the multiverse, flowing through everything, welded to all there is. If he were to even try to break the spell, all reality could implode as a result. Strange shows Beast the multiverse, infinite realities where other variants of himself are trying to do the same thing, undo Wanda's spell, and bring back the mutant gene. Beast finally sees how all of these lives are on the same journey, approaching the problem from different places and angles, and he realizes just how narrow his own experience is. Beast decides to visit a small village in the country of Transia and buys an old clock from a street vendor. He sits down to take a break, and a woman who looks very similar to Wanda says hello. She tells him the clock he just bought is fake, probably made in China, and will likely break in a few days. The woman asks Beast if she can tell him a story. A man and his wife were fighting and screaming at each other, and the man says his wife always puts him down and he wishes she had no eyes if she sees so little good in him. The magic comb tingled strangely under his fingers, and he realized he'd said too much. But the words were already uttered, and they couldn't be unsaid. At that moment, his wife was struck blind, her eyes sealed over with smooth, unbroken skin. Furious with her husband, she grabbed the magic comb and wished for her husband to have 1,000 eyes, to see how foolish he actually is. Eyes sprouted all over the man, on his hands, his arms, his chest, everywhere. He turned into a monster even stranger and uglier than his wife. After blaming each other and arguing about whose fault it was, the husband grabbed the comb and wished that they just had 4 eyes between them once again, and the wish came true once again. The wife now had 3 eyes, and the husband had only one giant eye in the middle of his face. The man later returned to the sea and gave the magic comb back to the mermaid, who said she also has a magic earring if he wants. Beast wanted to continue talking to this strange woman he had just met, saying that she reminds him of someone, but she had to leave. He then left Transia and went back to Neverland, the mutant camp where hundreds of mutants were experimented on and eventually killed. He wanted to give all of them a proper burial and dug graves for all the dead bodies he could find, remarking that he gave the past its due, which is all you can do in the end, for the dead and for the past. After Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch, used her reality-warping mutant powers to wipe the X gene from existence, the mutant population was decimated and faced extinction, with only a few hundred mutants left in the entire world. The mutants needed a miracle to save their race, and that miracle came true just a few hours ago, when Professor X was nearly killed after Cerebra detected the birth of a new mutant somewhere in Alaska, in a small town called Cooperstown. This baby was the first new mutant since M-Day, and the X-Men rushed immediately to get to him and keep him safe, but they were too late. When they arrived, the small town was decimated, and almost all its people were killed. Cyclops thought that maybe the baby's mutant powers manifested somehow and caused all this destruction, but they soon found evidence proving otherwise. They found dead marauders, mutants that were part of Mr. Sinister's personal guard, but that's not all. The place was also crawling with dead purifiers. The Purifiers were an anti-mutant criminal organization that came here with the sole purpose of killing the newly born mutant. Emma Frost used her powers to read the mind of a female survivor, and saw that the Purifiers arrived here first and started killing every child on sight, but they were soon met by the Marauders, who came here to kidnap the baby. They quickly killed the Purifiers and seemingly left with the baby mutant. Before leaving, the X-Men visited the hospital and found the nursery in flames. The Purifiers had burned the place down, killing everyone in sight, including other babies. Just minutes after they left this place, a monster called Predator X arrived and ate the leftover bodies of the Marauders. Predator X was created in a laboratory with the sole purpose of hunting down mutants and killing them. Professor X visited Cyclops and said he was working on Cerebra, trying to get it back online, and asked him why he wasn't informed that a team was sent to Cooperstown. Cyclops reminded the professor that he doesn't need his permission to lead the X-Men, and blamed Xavier for leaving his brother out in space and doing nothing while his father was killed. Scott said he doesn't need Xavier's help and asked him to just focus on his work and bring Cerebra back online. The X-Men didn't waste any time and sprung into action, tracking down several members of the Acolytes, a mutant group created by Magneto who were friends with the Marauders and knew where Mr. Sinister was hiding. Cyclops thought of something and asked for help from Jamie Madrox, aka Multiple Man, Julio Richter, who lost his mutant powers and was just a normal man now, and Layla Miller, who is a seemingly normal girl with the power of knowledge. Even though Mr. Sinister probably has the baby, Cyclops wants Richter to infiltrate the Purifiers and find out what he can from them. The first part of the plan began in New York City, inside an abandoned church where the Purifiers were holding a secret meeting. Wolfsbane snuck inside and attacked the Purifiers, injuring several of them, and then ran outside. Richter was waiting outside and shot Wolfsbane several times in the chest, but she managed to get away in a car. This whole stunt was planned by Cyclops, and it was enough to trick the Purifiers into believing that Richter was on their side. Meanwhile, Madrox and Layla went to Dallas to see Forge and talk to him about the second part of the plan. Forge said that he was able to build a chronal tracer for time and space, and that after M-Day, all time branches involving mutants flatlined. However, ever since the birth of the missing child, 2 new branches have appeared, and he wanted Madrox to investigate them. Jamie created 2 copies of himself, one for each branch line, and sent the first one into the future. The second copy stepped on the platform and waited for the process to begin, but Layla ran towards him and hugged him tight, causing the machine to send both of them into the future. Forge said that there was no way to bring them back, because this trip to the future was only one way. After the clones gathered the intel from the future, they were instructed to kill themselves, and the knowledge would be transferred directly into Jamie's mind. But what happens to Layla? Out of nowhere, Madrox's eyes started rolling backwards, and he began to feel weak and fainted. Madrox and Layla successfully arrived 80 years into the future, in a world that had no mention of mutants, as if they never existed. They quickly found out that what was left of the mutant population was taken inside concentration camps and were treated as prisoners. Meanwhile, in New York City, Richter was being scanned by the Purifiers to make sure he wasn't a mutant, and he passed with flying colors. He was then accepted to join them and was shown a secret room filled with tons of weapons built to kill mutants. Somewhere in the Canadian mountains, one lonely mutant was making camp and using his heat breath to start the fire, but he wasn't alone. Predator X was hunting mutants, and it didn't take long to find him and kill him. Back at the X Mansion, the new X-Men were mad at Cyclops for not including them in the mission against the Marauders, and decided to go after the Purifiers instead. Many of them hate the Purifiers after they killed many of their friends, and Surge suggested forming a group and attacking one of their bases. Over in Antarctica, Mr. Sinister told his Marauders to get ready because Cyclops sent the X-Men after them, and they need to be vigilant. He was right because the X-Men finally found them and made an entrance, while Wolverine said they were here for the baby and Rogue, who was being kept prisoner by Sinister. While this was going on, the new X-Men infiltrated the Purifiers' base and started killing them one by one, but they were eventually greeted by Deathstrike, a highly skilled and deadly assassin. A brutal clash erupted between Deathstrike's Reavers and the new X-Men, and Santo jumped in front and asked everyone to get out of there while they still could, but he didn't move fast enough, and Deathstrike injured him. The mutants were quickly outnumbered and outmatched, but luckily Richter, who was posing as one of the Purifiers, stepped in to help them. Pixie was able to safely teleport away all of her teammates just moments before Deathstrike's claws would have torn them apart. The fight in Antarctica wasn't going any better either. The X-Men were only 5, and the Marauders were a lot more, but luckily they had Emma Frost on their side, who was psychically linked with all 5 of them from the X-Mansion. But this link was interrupted when Pixie teleported the new X-Men away from the Purifier's base, and Sinister locked her out for good. Wolverine overpowered Gambit and pinned him to the ground. He then threatened him to say where they were keeping the baby, but Gambit says it's not with them, someone else has it. Sinister and his henchmen managed to overpower even Colossus and pin him to the ground. That's when Storm asked Nightcrawler to find Wolverine and teleport everyone away from there while she dealt with the rest of the Marauders. Kurt was barely able to teleport Wolverine away, but they were safe for now, and Logan managed to tell Emma Frost that the baby was not there. One of them, an X-Man, took the baby from Cooperstown. Cable returned from the future with a single mission: to get the new baby mutant and keep her safe. After 2 bad news in a row, it was time for a third. That's when 2 giant sentinels that were guarding the X-Mansion attacked Cyclops and the other mutants inside the mansion. Emma was the first one to be taken out, while Bishop retaliated, giving Beast enough time to take her out of there. Someone had reprogrammed the sentinels and had them attack the mutants. The new X-Men, who barely made it out alive after they attacked the Purifiers, returned home and crashed their Blackbird directly into one of the sentinels. X-23 then jumped out of the plane directly onto its back, determined to finish the job, and sliced the robot into pieces using her claws. Cyclops asked Dust to infiltrate the Sentinel and find out what happened to the people that were inside, and found something disturbing. The 2 pilots were infected by nano-sentinels who took over their bodies completely and launched an attack on the mutants. X-23 surprised one of the nano-sentinels from behind and stuck her claws in its back, instantly killing it. The other sentinel, however, managed to escape, saying that mutants would be terminated in due time. The X-Men returned from Antarctica and were shocked to find the X-Mansion in ruins. They had no idea the place was under attack. Cyclops believed that his son, Cable, was behind the attack because only he could have had access to nano-sentinel technology from the future. He decided to send the X-Force after Cable, a special group created inside the X-Men with some of their deadliest and most skilled assassins. Meanwhile, somewhere in Canada, Cable was on the run with the baby strapped to his body, while Deathstrike and her team of Reavers were right behind him and managed to corner him. She claimed he and the baby would die here today and attacked Cable viciously, sticking her claws inside his arm as he tried to protect the baby. But luckily for him, the X-Force found them and immediately jumped to help Cable, dealing with the assassins. Wolverine tried to get to Cable, but Deathstrike got in the way. He said he didn't have time for her, but knew someone who was pissed at her and wanted to have a go. Logan left his daughter to fight, and he went after Cable, trying to get to the baby. Deathstrike felt insulted that Wolverine left a girl to fight in his place and brutally attacked X-23, but Laura refused to fight back and just stood and took the hits. But she wasn't stupid. She was taking her time and caught Deathstrike by surprise, cutting through her cybernetics. This left her almost paralyzed and unable to move, and X-23 said she was losing blood faster than her body could heal, and she cut her cybernetics faster than they could repair. She then stabbed her from behind, leaving a big hole inside her abdomen and instantly killing the assassin. Logan was chasing Cable down through the thick snow, but Cable was moving pretty fast for an old man. He was backtracking the same way the X-Men came and was able to reach the X-Men's Blackbird. He then hijacked the plane and left the X-Men stranded in the mountains. 80 years into the future, Multiple Man and Layla were captured by the police and taken to the mutant relocation camp as prisoners. Both of them had their heads shaved, and they were forced to take a cold shower while the guards watched. A doctor tattooed an M shape on their faces that contained a special virus to make sure they would never escape. In the present, Cable parked the Blackbird and carjacked a truck, driving it all the way to Dallas and trying to get to Forge. He went inside the building and went up the stairs, saying he didn't come here to hurt him. He just wanted to borrow some components. He found Forge lying on the ground unconscious, and Cable asked him who did this to him, but he was also shot in the back and dropped to the ground unconscious. Bishop was the one who shot him, but Cable was not his main target. He pointed his gun at the baby and prepared to kill it. The baby started crying, and Bishop said he didn't understand. He didn't want to do this, but he had no other choice. But before he could pull the trigger, the Marauders, led by Gambit himself, jumped him from the back. Gambit asked Malice to grab the child and keep it safe, while Bishop said it had to die. Sunfire grabbed Bishop from behind and burned his body, while Gambit said they were stopping him from killing a baby. He then charged a deck of cards and threw it at Bishop, sending him flying into the air. The Marauders were able to deal with Bishop, and Sunfire wanted to kill him, but Gambit said there was no time because the X-Men were almost there. When the X-Men arrived, Bishop told them that Cable took out Forge and stole his equipment, and when the Marauders came, they kidnapped the baby. The X-Men didn't have any reason to doubt Bishop and believed his story. The new mutants that were left behind at the X-Mansion were able to fix Cerebra, and they could now trace the Marauders and follow the baby. In the future, Madrox and Layla explored the mutant camp and found a young boy named Lucas Bishop, who had the same M shape tattooed on his face. They asked him what happened to this world, why the humans turned on the mutants and locked them up inside camps like these. Bishop said that everything started 80 years ago, when the mutant population was nearly extinct, and a new mutant messiah was born. Everything was going great until the mutant messiah killed 1 million people, which caused the humans to turn on the mutants. Bishop's family was locked inside this camp, and he was born a prisoner. He watched both of his parents die and blamed his miserable life on the mutant messiah. He knew that someone tried to kill the baby when it was born and wished they would have succeeded. Maybe his parents would still be alive. After finally hearing the truth and getting the information they needed, Layla strapped a grenade to Madrox's body, which instantly killed him. This caused the real Madrox in the present to wake up from his coma with all of the knowledge from his clone from the future and asked where Bishop was. After he lost the baby to the Marauders, Cable asked Professor X for help, and he came to fix his injuries. Cable said he was not responsible for the Sentinel attack on the X-Mansion and asked the professor to believe him. He said he saw the future, and it's darker than anyone could ever imagine. It nearly killed him, and the only one who can save everyone, mutants and humans, is this baby. The Marauders brought the baby to Muir Island, and Cable was trying to stop it from crying. They were greeted by Mr. Sinister, who was happy to see the baby, and told his mutants to get ready because the X-Men were on their way. Sinister took the baby and went inside a secret room, but it wasn't actually him. Mystique killed Mr. Sinister and disguised herself as him. She had other plans for the baby. Back at the X-Mansion, the new mutants were shocked to find out that they were not alone. The Predator X, who was created to hunt and kill mutants, had finally reached the mansion and attacked them. The X-Men used Cerebra to track down Gambit and followed him to Muir Island, but the Marauders were waiting for them and ambushed them. Wolverine told Wolfsbane to not hold back or they will die here, but Scalp Hunter shot Logan in the eye, and he fell down while his brains were splattered all over the floor. It didn't take long for him to recover, and he tried to get up, but Scrambler tried to slow down his healing factor. Luckily, his daughter interfered and cut Scrambler into tiny pieces, remarking that her father was healing too slowly. Mystique and Gambit brought the baby mutant to a room where her daughter Rogue was being kept in a coma. She wanted to help her daughter and hoped that by absorbing the baby's powers, Rogue would eventually wake up. Mystique forced Rogue to kiss the baby, but this caused a powerful explosion that sent both of them against the wall. Luckily, the baby was alive and unharmed, but Rogue was still in a coma with no signs of waking up. Professor Xavier arrived and took the baby from them, and Gambit said he would stay where he belonged, at Rogue's side. The new X-Men were struggling against the Predator X, but one of them remembered that X-23 fought against one of these creatures and managed to kill it using her claws. Pixie offered to help and instantly teleported everyone from the mansion to Muir Island, including the Predator. They arrived exactly in the middle of the fight, leaving Cyclops in shock as to what just happened. Meanwhile, Professor X came out with the baby and gave it to Cable, telling him to take it and escape into the future. But before he could do anything, Bishop appeared and said he's not going anywhere and the child dies here. But they weren't alone. Predator X was close by, and Cable had to deal with 2 threats at once. Bishop tried to shoot Cable but hit the beast instead. It then jumped on him and tried to eat him alive. The brutal battle between the X-Men and the Marauders continued, with no clear winner in sight. Cyclops told Emma Frost to ask the students to join the fight and help them. The Marauders were trained to handle the X-Men, but they weren't prepared to handle the new generation of X-Men. In the middle of all the chaos, Cyclops found his son and asked him to hand over the baby, but he refused, saying it was in danger ever since it was born and wouldn't last a day here. The professor arrived and convinced Cable to trust his father, eventually giving him the baby. Meanwhile, Rogue was still in a coma with her mother crying by her side, but she eventually woke up. She had no idea where she was or what happened to her, but Mystique was just grateful she had finally woken up. However, Rogue was disgusted to find out that her mother used a mutant baby to absorb her powers. Rogue said that every time her mother tried to help, people got caught in between and ended up injured or even dead. Her mother couldn't keep doing this over and over and decided to do something about it. She removed her glove and touched her mother's face, wanting to kill her, saying she would always remember her and keep her in her heart. Mystique fell on the floor unconscious, but she wasn't dead. Somehow, touching the baby mutant did something to her and washed away her death touch. She decided to leave and asked Gambit not to follow her. She just wanted to be alone. The Marauders were slowly losing the fight, and the X-Men eliminated most of them one by one. In the end, the X-Men were victorious, but they still had to deal with the Predator X threat, who was proving to be incredibly hard to kill. Wolverine climbed on top of a platform and then jumped inside the Predator's mouth, being swallowed alive. The X-Men attacked the Beast together, trying to help Logan and get him outside, but he didn't need any help. He used his claws to cut the Beast from inside, eventually emerging from its abdomen and spilling its guts on the floor. Cyclops held the baby in his arms, thinking it was a boy, but Cable corrected him, saying it's actually a girl and her name is Hope. Scott remembered how he had to abandon his son some time ago, when he sent Cable into the future to save his life after he was infected with the techno-organic virus. Now that most of the threats were eliminated, the X-Men gathered around to see the baby Messiah, and Cyclops decided to trust his son and give the baby girl back to him, telling him to take her out of here and let her be herself. Let her choose her own destiny and not be a strategic asset, used by or against the mutants. Cable agreed to keep her safe and said he would return to report back just as soon as he got settled somewhere. He activated his time machine and began to slowly fade away. But out of nowhere, Bishop got up and tried to shoot him and Hope, but Cable had already jumped and the shots hit someone else. Cyclops instantly reacted and blew Bishop away using a powerful energy blast. But sadly, the damage was already done. Professor X was caught in plain sight and unintentionally shot by Bishop. He dropped dead on the floor while the X-Men couldn't believe what just happened. The mutants asked Cyclops what they should do next, but the only thing he could think to say was, pray.
Pray that the child's birth means something, that we won't be the last, that there's still something good left in the world. It was Xavier's dream, wasn't it? It began with him, and it ends with him. There are no more X-Men.
Somewhere in the future, on the shores of San Francisco, a beam of energy began to form, and a temporal portal opened up.
Sun's coming up, kid. We made it. Now comes the hard part.
After Wanda Maximoff used her reality-warping powers to completely destroy the mutant gene, the mutant population was decimated and faced extinction, with only 200 mutants left in the entire world. However, a miracle happened, and a new mutant baby girl named Hope was born in Cooperstown, a small town in Alaska. The town was quickly overrun by anti-mutant zealots who killed every baby in town trying to get the baby Messiah. Luckily, Cable came from the future and risked his life to save her, believing that she is the mutants' only hope of survival in a grim and hopeless future. Cyclops trusted his son and asked him to take her into the future to keep her safe and give her a better life than he was able to give him. But as soon as Cable arrived in the future, something went terribly wrong. His time machine broke and he couldn't travel back in time anymore, only into the future. Cable did his best to keep Hope safe and even settled down with a woman in the year 2276, but it didn't last long. Someone was always right behind them, trying to get to the girl and kill her. Bishop, who was a former X-Men member, believed that Hope is a harbinger of his future, a future where mutants are held in concentration camps, branded, and sent to the slaughter like animals. He truly believed that she would cause the end of the mutant race and turned against the X-Men and then tried to kill the girl. To find Cable and kill the girl, he teamed up with Strife, who was a clone of Cable but a lot stronger because his body was never infected with the techno-organic virus. At first, Strife didn't want to get involved, but Bishop said he knew where Apocalypse was, and he would help him kill him together. Apocalypse raised Strife as his own son, but he actually just used him his entire life and only wanted to transfer his consciousness into his body. Strife despised him for this and wanted to kill Apocalypse, so he agreed to help Bishop. When Cable failed to return to the past, Cyclops knew that something went wrong. He and Beast were able to track his son in the future, so they sent the X-Force to find him and see what went wrong, why he never returned back into the past. The X-Force is a special team of assassins, consisting of some of the deadliest mutants in X-Men: Archangel, X-23, Domino, Wolverine, Warpath, Elixir, and Vanisher, who were all teleported to New York City in the year 2973. The city was mostly destroyed, and there were no people in sight, but they were not alone. Out of nowhere, a sniper shot Vanisher in the neck, and he dropped to the ground. The mutants took cover behind the rubble, but Deadpool appeared out of nowhere and surprised them, saying they looked kind of familiar. The X-Force couldn't believe it was actually him and asked what he was doing here. Vanisher was mad and asked Wolverine to kill him, but Logan had already stabbed him in the brain with his claws. They eventually teamed up and went searching for Cable, but Wolverine sniffed something in the air. He sprinted towards a target, but was greeted by a young girl with red hair and wearing a blue X-Men suit. He was caught off guard and forgot to watch his back and was ambushed by Cable, who put a gun to his head. Wolverine told him to ease up because they were there to help him, but Cable said he didn't need any help and asked Hope to grab his hand and wanted to leave. Logan tried to stop him, but he got punched in the face for it, while Cable said they walked right into a trap. He took them to the edge of the city and showed them something they couldn't believe was real: a celestial city that belongs to Strife, Cable's biggest enemy, who has been trying to kill him ever since he was born. The story jumps to another period in time when Cable and Hope were exploring the future together. In this future, things are not going well for humanity. The world was plagued by many nuclear wars that allowed cockroaches to mutate and become giant monsters that could fly. Cable joined the only human resistance left alive and offered his services in exchange for food, protection, and weapons. Because it was difficult to survive in the open, the scientists developed a bioweapon that theoretically could harm the genetics of the roach soldiers. And if it works, the roaches will be unable to move and within a few minutes die. But there is only one problem. There are very high chances that the same thing could happen to humans as well. Cable opposed this decision and told Hope they needed to leave this place. The Resistance launched the attack on the roach soldiers, but Cable and Hope jumped again, this time 100 years into the future. As it turns out, Cable was right. The bioweapon worked and succeeded in killing the roaches, but it also had devastating effects on the humans, killing what was left of the surviving people. This future was nothing but a giant wasteland. There were no survivors, no food, and no water anywhere in sight. Cable told Hope that they just needed to travel further in time because nature always finds a way to come back. They just needed to go further. They jumped again, this time 1,000 years into the future, but this time things were even worse. The place looked even more abandoned, and there was nothing left but sand. Hope was curious and asked why they didn't just slide back home in the past, but Cable explained that his time machine was broken, and he didn't have any parts to fix it. Sadly, they were stuck in the future. They walked for days but couldn't find any signs of life. Eventually, it started raining, but before they could drink, they first needed to make sure the water was safe to drink. Sadly, even the water was contaminated, and drinking it would mean a painful death. They jumped another time, this time arriving right on top of a giant crater, probably caused by the impact of a giant asteroid. They both fell inside the crater, but something was wrong. Cable began to feel weak. He hadn't eaten anything for weeks and hadn't drunk any water in many days. He was saving every drop of water for Hope. Hope began to panic and tried to wake him up, but nothing worked. His body finally gave out, but Hope, just like Cable, was a survivor, and she spotted something sticking out from the sand. She dug deeper and found a giant ship hidden under all that dirt. First, she salvaged parts, just like Cable taught her to do, and then she went back to search for supplies. The crew was long dead and only their skeletons remained, and there were no signs of anything worth eating. She went deeper and found the ship's urine filtration unit, a machine that the crew used to filter urine and turn it into water. She took one of the tanks and took it outside to perform a test and see if the water was safe to drink. Luckily it was, and she gave some water to Cable, and he immediately woke up. Cable was proud of her and thought that maybe her mutant powers had developed, which allowed her to find the ship buried under all that sand. They continued their journey to Westchester, New York, and arrived at the former site of the X-Mansion. Cable hoped that maybe Cyclops left something here for them, just in case they ever needed it in the future, and he was right. They found a room filled with supplies, weapons, clothes, and some food that was long overdue. They also found something else, a digital recorder with an audio message left by his father.
Nathan, I'm leaving this in the one place you might think to look, Westchester, or what remains of it. It's been 8 weeks since you jumped into the time stream. We've discovered that Bishop has stolen a time machine from Forge to come after you and the baby. He won't stop until she's dead. I feel just as helpless as I did, when I was forced to give you up all those years ago. Life is full of tragedies and death. You learn to deal with those, you learn to cope, but it's impossible to do the same when all you have are questions. And there's only one thing that can keep it from overwhelming you: faith. There's no one I have more faith in than you, Nathan. I trust that you know what's right, and that's what keeps me going. You're my son. That's all I need to know.
After taking everything they needed from the X-Mansion, Cable and Hope made another jump, this time arriving on the outskirts of Westchester in the year 2973, the same timeline where the X-Force arrived. But something was wrong. His time machine was not working anymore, and this place was far from being safe. Wolverine grabs Deadpool by the neck and demands some answers. He wants to know why they are here in the future, at the former home of Apocalypse and the current home of Strife. Wade says that everything began in the year 2034 when he was hired to smack down a rebellion led by some blonde chick with a big gun. However, he was quickly outmatched and had to run from them. He tried to hide inside an industrial freezer, thinking it would be a safe place. But there was a powerful explosion and the building came crashing down, trapping him inside the freezer. He was trapped there all along, and after many decades, he developed multiple personalities to keep himself entertained. He was trapped there for 800 years until a group of scavengers found him. They were hoping to find food and other supplies, but they found Deadpool barely alive. He got out and attacked them, but his healing factor wasn't what it used to be anymore. Out of nowhere, the scavengers looked extremely scared and quickly ran away. But it wasn't him they were afraid of. It was Strife. Cable says that's not possible. He watched Strife die with his own eyes, after his body disintegrated. Deadpool says that some kind of global catastrophe had wiped out most of the people on Earth, and his crazy brother stepped in to fill the void, enslaving the human race and transforming the world in his own image. Wade was left with no choice, so he joined him, but he eventually left, saying Strife was too ruthless even for him, making even the Age of Apocalypse seem nice in comparison. In his pursuit of finding Cable, Bishop traveled into the future and arrived in a time where most of the world was in ruins. He found some of the last few humans on Earth who told him about a sleeping god somewhere in the mountains. Bishop went to that location and found something shocking. Apocalypse was sleeping and regenerating his body inside a tomb. At the height of his power, Apocalypse ruled the world with an iron fist, but now he was weak and vulnerable, and Bishop offered to help Strife kill him together. Even so, killing Apocalypse took everything they had, but eventually, they succeeded in killing him, and Strife agreed to help Bishop. Wolverine confronted Cable, asking why he didn't notice all of this happening, how Strife took over the world, but Cable says he doesn't need to explain himself to him. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a large group of drone soldiers were sent by Strife to attack them, and a brutal fight began. For the last couple of years, Cable was so focused on keeping Hope alive that he forgot he has enemies of his own, but this time, he wasn't alone. The X-Men were here to help him, but during the fight, Archangel hears something, a faint voice calling out to him from afar. He doesn't know who that is and flies away, heading in the direction of the voice. The mutants were able to fend off the attack and keep Hope alive, but they were still in danger. Strife flies towards them and attacks them head-on. He calls Cable old and weak, saying that killing him is almost meaningless, almost. Wolverine gives the order to kill Strife, but this was easier said than done. He quickly deals with Logan and Warpath, saying they are like mice trying to kill the cat. Cable jumps at him, calling him a mistake that never got corrected. He got close enough to attach a grenade to his body and detonates it. The explosion was powerful, but it didn't do much to hurt Strife. He was unharmed and continued his attack. He noticed that everyone was trying to keep Hope alive and is intrigued by this. So Strife grabs the girl and Warpath and then flies back to the city. Meanwhile, Archangel was following the voice in his head, which led him towards some abandoned caves. Inside, he finds a weak and injured Apocalypse. The fight with Bishop and Strife almost killed him, but he was still alive. He begs for his life and asks Archangel to bring him what he needs to restore him to his full strength, but Warren refuses to help him and leaves, saying he deserves to die for what he's done. The X-Men were beaten without even breaking a sweat, and Domino asks what they should do next. Cable says they need to charge the Citadel, take out Strife, and get Hope back. That's the plan. Strife trapped Hope inside a field of energy while Warpath was being tortured in the background. He doesn't understand why the girl is so special and tries to read her mind, but she looked normal. She wasn't even a mutant to him. Hope notices that Strife looks very much like Cable and thinks it's actually him in disguise. Bishop arrives and activates a special signal that weakens Strife, causing him to drop the force field. This leaves Hope vulnerable, and Bishop takes advantage of this and pulls out his gun, saying he will kill the girl before she kills the world. He pulls the trigger, but Strife recovers and uses his powers to stop the bullets and then attacks Bishop. He doesn't understand why Bishop betrayed him, but he reads his mind and finally understands that he was trying to kill the girl all this time, and not Cable. While this was going on, Cable and the other X-Men were slowly advancing towards Strife's citadel, dealing with his drones one by one. Strife grabs Hope and says that Cable cares for her, but she is not his daughter, but she loves him like a father. She removes his mask, revealing his face, which prompted her to hug him, thinking he was Cable all this time. Warpath was able to free himself and attack Strife, telling him to get his hands off her. He punched him in the face, but it did very little to injure him, and he retaliated with a powerful blast of energy. This left Warpath unconscious on the ground, but Bishop surprised him from behind with a powerful hit, saying the girl isn't special, she is dead. Bishop grabs the girl and prepares to kill her, saying that many years ago he had the chance to kill her when she was just a baby, but he hesitated. He won't make the same mistake again. However, Strife noticed that Bishop was getting most of his energy from his bionic arm, so he used his powers to completely destroy his arm. He then asked Hope which one of his organs he should crush first. Bishop and Warpath were now both unconscious on the ground, and Strife sits on the throne holding Hope in his arms, but they weren't alone for long. Cable finally found them and he was pissed as hell, asking Strife to give him the girl. He was able to distract him long enough for Hope to run away, and it was now a fight to the death between Cable and his clone. Strife struck Cable with a powerful blast of energy, and he retaliated with many gunshots which destroyed a big part of his armor. But Cable wasn't alone. Wolverine joins the fight and attacks Strife from behind, dealing a powerful blow to his face. The other mutants also joined the fight, but Strife was just too powerful. He quickly deals with all of them, forcing Wolverine to stab himself in the face with his own claws. Back in the caves, Archangel returns to Apocalypse, saying that no matter how much he twisted him, there was still mercy deep within him. There was still humanity somewhere inside him. He brings Apocalypse something he needed to partially restore his body and his strength. Apocalypse recovers and says that sparing his life is a sign of weakness, but today they are both going to the same place to do the same thing. Strife grabs Cable by the throat and reads his mind, saying he was focused on the wrong thing all this time. He grabs the girl and takes her into another part of his citadel. Bishop eventually recovers and attacks Cable, but he wasn't the only one. Wolverine also wakes up, but he wasn't himself. His brain was still damaged, and he was in animal mode, reduced to his basic needs. Archangel brings Apocalypse to the Celestial City, and they go inside a secret room, a room where Apocalypse is able to feed on energy and restore himself to full glory. Bishop follows Strife and Hope to a giant room, claiming that Hope needs to die because she is a threat even for him, but he was still no match for the mighty mutant. Cable also arrives, and he wasn't alone. He brought Wolverine, who was still in animal rage. Strife was now fighting all three of them. He grabs Wolverine by the legs and uses his body to spin around and injure Cable, and then doing the same thing to Bishop. Cable talks to himself, forcing himself to keep going and not stop until the girl is safe. That's when Deadpool shows up, carrying a big-ass rocket launcher that shoots a giant blast of energy, enough to push Strife off the platform and fall into the void. Wolverine recovers while Hope hugs Cable, and Deadpool says that Strife is now dead. But that wasn't actually true because Strife could fly, and he returns even angrier. He grabs Deadpool and breaks his body in half, while he says this wasn't part of his severance plan for working for him all these years. The fight resumed, with the X-Men attacking Strife all at the same time, but it didn't matter what they did. He was just too powerful, and he quickly dealt with all of them simultaneously. But things were about to turn around when Archangel and Apocalypse both arrived, with Apocalypse saying Strife failed to kill, and failure is a weakness, so the weakness must be culled. Apocalypse was way beyond Strife's level and quickly dealt with him, calling him a mistake and saying he no longer has a place in this world and will die soon. Apocalypse says he was reborn from the DNA of his greatest horseman and fueled by hate for allowing himself to even create Strife in the first place. Strife says he is sorry. He didn't mean to disobey his father, but Apocalypse says he is not his father. He is his executioner, and the age of Strife ends now. Somehow, Bishop was still alive, and he recovered once again. He pulls out his gun and wants to kill Hope at any cost, but Apocalypse grabs the girl and calls her special, saying he can feel her strength and deems her worthy of hosting his consciousness. He attacks Bishop with a blast of energy, calling him a frail creature for trying to destroy the future of the mutant species, and then kills him. Archangel says the girl is strong, but so is everyone around here, and they won't ask for mercy like he did back in the caves. He claims the girl because Apocalypse owes him a life for a life, and asks him to hand over the girl right now. Apocalypse agrees and gives him the girl as payment for saving his life. He vows to return again and claim the girl because he is infinite and has enough time to return when the girl is ready. He grabs Strife, who was barely alive, and takes him away, saying that today he will accomplish the greatest purpose he could have in life, to become his vessel of power and consciousness. After everything was done and settled, Logan asks Cable to take Hope and leave, go somewhere else and keep her safe, and the two of them jump again into another time stream once again. In the blink of an eye, the mutant species went from a population of 16 million to just 198. To make matters worse, the mutant gene had shut down, and years passed with no new mutant activations. Extinction was almost guaranteed, and the mutants' future was uncertain. Then, one morning, the impossible happened. A mutant baby was born. Her birth was greeted with carnage and death, but her salvation came in the form of the X-Man, Cable. Cable and the X-Men saved her from those who wanted to control or kill her, but Cyclops decided to send her into the future to keep her safe, with Cable as her protector. The future proved to be just as dangerous as the present, but Cable kept her safe and taught her to be a soldier like him. After 16 years in the future, she decided to come back. Her name is Hope Summers, and she returned with Cable to Westchester, New York, where the X-Mansion was located. But they didn't expect to find the place destroyed and abandoned. The X-Men were long gone, and there was nobody left to greet them. Hope found an old picture of the X-Men, and Cable said they were in the right timeline, but something must have happened because the place had been abandoned for months. But they were not alone. A group of armed drones attacked them out of nowhere, and Hope asked if Bishop was behind the attack. But it wasn't Bishop. These drones were sent by the Purifiers, an anti-mutant group of people who hate mutants and want to exterminate their race once and for all. The Purifiers had tried to kill Hope once before when she was born. They were the main reason she was sent into the future. Cable recognized the tech inside the drones and used it to cloak themselves just as Purifier reinforcements arrived. But the Purifiers were not the only ones who were informed of their arrival. The X-Men, who were now living on Utopia, a small island outside of San Francisco, one of the few cities in the country that still welcomed mutants, learned of it too. Cyclops summoned the team, and magic teleported everyone to the X-Mansion, but they were too late. They found only the remains of the robot drones, and no sign of Cable and Hope. The two time travelers were on the road, running from the Purifiers, who were slowly gaining on them. Luckily, the X-Men arrived and ambushed the Purifiers head-on, attacking all three cars that were in pursuit and giving Cable enough time to escape. Wolverine and his daughter, X-23, interrogated two of them and asked how they were tracking them. To make it more convincing, X-23 killed one of them in cold blood. The other zealot said he had no idea how they were tracking them. Someone else was sending them the locations. Over in Washington, D.C., at the Purifiers' main headquarters, William Stryker, Graydon Creed, and Cameron Hodge were reporting to Bastion what happened in Westchester. Bastion is a hybrid sentinel who came from the future, determined to kill Hope and wipe out the mutant population for good. Cable and the young girl went inside a mini-market to get some supplies, but Hope was distracted by all the shelves filled with products. She had spent most of her life in an apocalyptic future, scraping for food and other things to survive, while here, there was an abundance of everything. After leaving the mini-market, they found a motel by the side of the road and decided to spend the night there. Hope was overwhelmed with joy to find a soft bed and couldn't help herself from jumping up and down. Cable read a newspaper and found out that San Francisco is one of the few cities left in America that still welcomes mutants. He thought the X-Men might be located there and told Hope to get some sleep because they would leave early in the morning. But sadly, they weren't safe at all. Bastion said that because Cable is infected with the techno-organic virus, they were able to track him and know their exact location. He sent William Stryker and a squad of Purifiers after them and asked him to kill everyone and leave no survivors. Back in the mini-market, Cable caught Hope looking at beauty products and got something for her, a hairbrush. Hope appreciated the gesture and said the brush was for babies, but she did use a hairpin, although she wasn't sure if she used it correctly. Out of nowhere, the Purifiers arrived and surrounded the place, shutting down the power and even internet access. Luckily, the X-Men were heading toward them, and Cyclops said they were about 1.5 kilometers away. William Stryker ordered his goons to rush inside the room, but Cable blasted most of them away. He hit the fuel tank of a nearby truck, which caused a giant explosion, killing more Purifiers. It didn't take long for the X-Men to arrive, and Wolverine told Cable to take a deep breath, saying the good guys were there to save his ass again. While this was going on, another X-Men team was infiltrating a secret base where Cameron Hodge was preparing his army of over 100 armored Purifiers as a backup in case Stryker's attack failed. Logan asked Magic to take Hope out of there and keep her safe, but the Zealots were preparing to shoot them using a powerful cannon. Magic opened a portal and grabbed Hope's hand, but the cannon caused a giant explosion that made her lose her focus. This had devastating effects, as her connection with Limbo was still open, and many demonic creatures grabbed her and pulled her inside. Sadly, her brother Colossus couldn't do anything to save her. She was already gone. The rest of the X-Men were slowly winning the fight, killing zealots left and right, which prompted Stryker to call for reinforcements. While everyone was distracted, Cable took the girl and ran away, saying that something was wrong. Cyclops ordered Cannonball to engage his team and attack the zealots to prevent them from leaving to go and help Stryker, but Cannonball wasn't sure they could stop the attack without any casualties. The Beta team engaged the enemy and had the element of surprise, but Cameron was prepared for such an attack. Thanks to Bastion's advanced tech, he transformed into a scorpion-shaped robot and attacked the mutants. This robot was incredibly strong and fast, and on top of that, they still had to deal with the zealots. Cannonball asked Karma to take control of Cameron's mind, but he was able to spot her and cut off one of her legs. The new mutants sprang into action to take Karma to safety and keep her alive, but it was pointless. The zealots were just too many, and Cameron Hodge was too powerful. Cannonball asked Warlock to use his powers and help them, even though violence goes against his nature, saying that if he doesn't do anything, none of them will leave this place alive. Back in Utopia, Rogue told Cyclops that ever since Hope came back from the future, she felt a connection with her and needed to see her immediately. When Hope was just a baby, she brought Rogue back from a coma just by touching her, and this created a special bond between them. Cyclops agreed and asked Ariel to teleport Rogue as close as possible to Wolverine and his team. The two girls were reunited with the other X-Men, and from then on, Nightcrawler and Rogue scouted ahead, while Wolverine and the rest followed them. Rogue pointed Nightcrawler towards Hope, and the two of them jumped over 800 miles in just a few minutes. The other X-Men followed closely, but they were in grave danger without even knowing it. Bastion had sent a fighter jet to intercept them, which fired a rocket towards their cars. Even though Archangel was able to take down the fighter jet, the missile was on its way and reached its target, hitting Wolverine's car and completely destroying it. He and X-23 survived, but Ariel didn't make it. She died in the explosion. Logan said they couldn't stop now and needed to keep moving. Payback would come later. Back in the Purifier's base, Warlock decided to listen to Cannonball and join the fight. He was able to absorb the life of every Purifier inside the drones, and then went straight for Cameron, taking control of his mind and then breaking his head right off, instantly killing him. Cannonball reported back to Emma Frost and said they killed all the Purifiers and found out how Bastion was tracking Cable. Somewhere in Nebraska, Cable and Hope made camp inside an abandoned trailer park, but they weren't out of danger. Another group of Purifiers was able to find them and was preparing to shoot them down, but Wolverine and the other X-Men surprised them from behind. They quickly dealt with the Zealots, and Cable came outside to talk. Logan said that they were tracking the virus inside his body and knew exactly where he was at all times. After spending so many years together in the future, Cable decided to separate from Hope and send her with another team to Utopia, hopefully without being tracked this time. Wolverine told Rogue to take Hope and go with Nightcrawler, separating them into two teams. She absorbed his powers and others as well, including Archangel and Colossus, and became a beast of her own. Nightcrawler took the two girls and began his first jump towards San Francisco, while Wolverine asked if anyone knew any short prayers. After several jumps, they arrived in Las Vegas, Nevada, but the jumps took a lot out of Nightcrawler, and he needed a few minutes to catch his breath. Sadly, they didn't have any time to spare because someone attacked them, and Rogue told Hope to get behind her. Instead of sending more Purifiers, Bastion decided to send one of his drones after the girl. The drone tries to shoot Hope, but Nightcrawler jumps in the way and protects her. Rogue attacks and punches it in the face, completely destroying its head, and then uses her Wolverine claws to slice it up, but the drone recovers immediately and breaks them off. She jumps on him and pins him to the ground, but the drone powers up and shoots a blast of energy from its chest, powerful enough to send Rogue to the ground and leave her unconscious. Hope picks up a crowbar and tries to help her, but the drone is just too powerful and can instantly regenerate its body. He wants to kill the girl and goes for her throat, but Nightcrawler jumps between them, trying to teleport Hope away, but the drone's hand goes right through his chest as he is phasing out. With his last dying breath, Nightcrawler is able to safely teleport the girl all the way to Utopia, but the drone's hand is still lodged inside his chest, right through his heart. He gently dies away in her arms while saying that he believes in her. When Cyclops arrives, he has no idea what to expect, but he finds Hope on the ground next to Nightcrawler's lifeless body. Several hours later, the X-Men return to Utopia while Colossus says they need to go to Limbo right now and get his sister back, but Cyclops and Emma Frost await them with even more bad news. Wolverine couldn't believe that his friend was dead and was angrier than ever. while one of the mutants asks Hope to bring him back. Hope is confused, saying she doesn't understand. How could she bring him back? She can't do that. She can't do anything. She's a nobody. And then she starts running away. Cable goes after her and tries to console her, saying that he and she are both going to survive this. Nathan introduces her to Scott Summers, saying that Cyclops is his father. Meanwhile, somewhere inside the X-Men base, Donald Pierce, who was working for Bastion, reports back, saying that Cerebra and communications are down and asks what to do next. Bastion tells him to go to the hangar and sabotage their planes. He doesn't want the X-Men to leave the island at any cost. The X-Men gather and organize a small ceremony in Kurt's name, while each remembers precious moments spent together. Wolverine is barely holding together, saying that Kurt was the only guy who ever looked him in the eyes like a man and treated him like one. He was his best friend and never treated him like a damn animal. And now he's gone. And for what? He looks towards Cable and Hope and says she'd better be worth it. Cable brings Hope to the canteen and tells her to eat something because she hasn't slept in the last 24 hours and doesn't even know she is hungry. Moonstar says she wants to talk in private with Cable once he's put the girl to bed, but this triggers Hope, who confronts her. Moonstar is furious because her team was covering for them in the Purifier's base, dealing with Cameron Hodge and his drones, and it's not the first time they've done this for Cable. Hope punches her in the face and the two girls begin to fight. Food trays start flying while the girls jump at each other's throats, but Cyclops arrives and asks them to break it up. Cable stops his father and tells him to let them fight, saying that none of them are Hope's fathers and she needs to make her own decisions. Just as father and son were about to fight as well, a powerful explosion shook the entire compound. Donald Pierce was able to cause a massive explosion that destroyed all of the Blackbirds, saying he was sorry he won't be alive to witness the extinction of the mutant race. Namor grabs his hand and rips it right off, while Cyclops finishes him off with a powerful energy blast. But sadly, the damage was done, and the X-Men were now stuck on Utopia with no means of escaping. However, the worst was yet to come as the place suffers another attack, and the X-Men all rush outside to see what just happened. Everyone is shocked to see that the sky is painted in red, but they have no idea what just happened. A giant red sphere of energy has surrounded Utopia, the small island next to San Francisco, and home to some of the last mutants left alive in the entire world. Cyclops asks Iceman and Archangel to inspect the sphere and see if they can break it, but nothing seems to work, and Archangel says the sphere is harder than diamond. Bastion says it's finally done. The containment area around the island is in place, and the X-Men are now trapped. The final phase of his attack can begin. The Avengers spring into action and come to San Francisco to help the X-Men, but even James Bradley, one of the brightest scientists in the world, doesn't know what this is, and just says it is indestructible. Thor doesn't like that word, and strikes the sphere using his hammer, but he doesn't even land a scratch. Not even Mjolnir can break it. As if this wasn't bad enough, out of nowhere, another smaller sphere appears in the middle of the Golden Gate Bridge. Iceman gets close to inspect it, when a hand reaches out and grabs him by the throat. It is Nimrod, an advanced sentinel created with the sole purpose of killing mutants. But it isn't alone. 5 Nimrods in total emerge from the sphere, all programmed to do one thing: kill the X-Men. One Nimrod is enough to put all of the mutants in danger, but 5 of them is a whole other level of threat. These sentinels are designed to analyze and adapt to individual mutants' powers and counteract their effects, making them extremely dangerous. Rogue still has all of the different powers from before and manages to kill one of them all by herself, while Namor does the same, punching a hole straight through one of their heads. The X-Men succeed in destroying all of the Nimrods, but not without casualties and injured people. Bastion comes from a future where humanity wins and all the mutants are wiped out. This sphere is a gateway to his future, and he is able to bring Nimrods to this timeline. The X-Men figure out that the sphere is directly connecting their timeline to a future timeline where the Nimrods originated from. Around 170,000 Nimrods are in contact with a central AI in the future, and are ready to be sent into the past if needed. Cyclops comes up with a plan and wants to send Cypher into the future timeline, using Cable's time machine, and take control of the central AI. Hopefully, he will be able to shut down all of the Nimrods before they get a chance to come here and kill everyone. To keep Cypher safe, Cyclops sends the X-Force, a special unit inside the X-Men, consisting of some of their deadliest members: Archangel, X-23, Wolverine, Domino, Cypher, and of course, Cable. Cable hugs Hope and says goodbye as he gets ready to jump again into an unknown future, but he is visibly saddened as if this was their final goodbye. After leaving, Cyclops tells everyone the truth. Cable only had one jump left in his time machine, and he knew it. They all knew it, but they still went anyway, even though they have no way of getting back. Hope is furious and jumps at him, cursing him for sending Cable on a suicide mission, but he had no other choice. He sent his own son to die. Meanwhile, outside of the giant red sphere, the Fantastic Four come to help, but even Reed Richards couldn't think of a solution. This thing is impenetrable. Inside the city, a second wave of Nimrods emerges and begins terrorizing the mutants and even the people. The X-Force arrives in the future and is greeted with a shocking sight. 2 giant Master Mold Sentinels are towering over the city, and thousands of Nimrods are lining up to be teleported into the past. They are greeted with a gruesome image, a wall filled with names of every mutant killed, including their own names. Archangel tears down this wall, and X-23 says this doesn't change anything, but in order to prevent this future, they need to kill every single one of these Nimrods, and then get back into their own time and stop the same thing from happening there. Back in the past, Cyclops asks Professor X for help, saying he needs him to talk with his son, David Haller, also known as Legion, an Omega-level mutant who's also schizophrenic. They needed all the help they could get. Scott also asks Rogue to watch over Hope and keep her safe. She hates him at the moment, but she trusts Rogue. Legion is incredibly dangerous and unpredictable, but Charles talks to his son and says they need his help. David's multiple personalities each possess different mutant powers, making him a potential Omega-level mutant, but also very unpredictable. Rogue tells Hope that she was sent to keep an eye on her and make sure she doesn't get hurt, but the girl was trained by Cable to be a soldier and says she is done with letting other people die for her and wants to fight. The X-Men were slowly losing the fight against the Nimrods, who were coming in waves of 5 at a time and managed to surround Colossus. Legion accessed one of his personalities, in the form of a metal-headed woman, who could shoot incredibly strong energy blasts from her hands. Just one of these hits was powerful enough to destroy one of the Nimrods, but the others reprogrammed themselves to counteract his powers. So Legion used another personality, a drunk man with acidic breath, powerful enough to completely destroy another Nimrod. Legion gave the X-Men a much-needed break, allowing them to regroup and come to Colossus's aid. Meanwhile, the X-Force was slowly advancing towards the 2 Master Mold Sentinels, dealing with waves of people who were protecting the robots. Eventually, they came face-to-face with the Master Sentinels, but while one of them was in charge of producing Nimrods for the invasion, the other one was protecting it and got up, scaring even Wolverine. The X-Force split into 2 teams. While Wolverine, Archangel, X-23, and Domino stayed outside to fight the Guard Sentinel, Cable and Cypher went inside one of the buildings where Master Mold's processing core was located. Cypher connected himself to the machine and went inside the network, trying to take control of it and stop the attack. But the AI was adapting to everything Cypher was doing and slowly taking over his mind. In just a few moments, it completely took control over Cypher and wanted to assimilate him. But Cypher was much stronger than the AI and started to slowly reprogram it from the inside. Eventually, he returned and took control of it, just in time to save Cable from impending death. He was able to swiftly take out the second Master Mold that was outside and fighting the X-Force, causing it to crash to the ground. He then immediately took control of every Nimrod and took them offline, stopping the attack and saving the mutant race from extinction. Wolverine regrouped inside with Cable while X-23 tried to pass through the temporal sphere in hopes of returning to the past, but nothing organic could pass through, and it instantly burned her. They were pretty much stuck in this timeline, unless Cable had been infected with the techno-organic virus ever since he was just a baby, and had been fighting his entire life to keep it suppressed. But now, for the first time in his life, he decided to let it take over his body completely. Now part machine and part human, Cable passed through the temporal sphere and emerged in the past timeline, but it was taking a huge toll on his body. He made an opening large enough for the other X-Men to pass through, while Hope begged him to come back to her. Slowly, the mutants passed through the sphere. Domino took X-23 to the other side while she was unconscious from the previous attempt, followed by Archangel, Wolverine, and Cypher. Logan asked them to take Cypher, saying that he did it. He shut down the Nimrods, while Hope ran towards the sphere, trying to get to Cable. He saw her and smiled one last time, knowing that after all these years, she was finally safe with the X-Men. The sphere was finally closing, and it was too much for him to handle. His body disintegrated under the immense pressure, while Hope screamed his name in horror. Seeing his plan falling apart infuriated Bastion, who was watching everything from a distance. He said this changed nothing, and the girl must die, then flew away towards the Golden Gate Bridge to kill her himself. Hope remembered a conversation between her and Cable that had happened in the 31st century a while ago. She wanted to know when would be the right time to return to the past and face her destiny, and Cable told her she would know when the moment came because something would light inside her, like a fire. He knew this for sure because the same thing had happened to him the first time he held her in his arms, back in Cooperstown. After the sphere closed, there was nothing left of Cable. Only his robotic arm remained, which got separated from his body. Hope blamed Cyclops for everything and said she hated him, but they were not safe just yet. Bastion blasted a hole inside the bridge, causing it to break in half and split the X-Men. He said that survival was not an option, and that the mutant species ended here, with her, while Cyclops told her to run. Everyone told her to run, but she refused to move, saying that Cable was all she had. He was her whole life. Bastion powered up and shot a blast of energy towards her, but for the first time in her life, her mutant powers started to manifest. She was able to block his attack and retaliated with an energy blast directly from her eyes, just like Cyclops. This left Bastion crippled on his left side, and she rushed with a powerful hit through his chest. But Bastion regenerated his body and continued his attacks, saying her death was the reason for his existence, and they would never quit. She needed to die to ensure that humanity lived. Their fight raged on as Hope shot powerful blasts of energy directly from her eyes, but Bastion refused to give up. But Hope wasn't fighting alone. The X-Men were right behind her, and Cyclops shot Bastion, destroying his right arm. Wolverine then jumped on his back and began to slash his body, saying, "This is for Kurt." Hope powered up again, fueled by her feelings for Cable, creating a devastating energy blast that completely disintegrated Bastion and destroyed the giant sphere that surrounded Utopia. Professor Xavier and the X-Men gazed in shock as Hope slowly powered down after killing Bastion. But the final attack took a lot out of her, and she felt weak in the knees. She saw Cable's severed arm on the ground and dropped down to touch it, crying his name as she slowly fell asleep, hugging it just to feel close to him a bit longer. Now that the danger was over and Bastion was killed, everyone was taken to the infirmary, and Hope woke up 30 hours later. Beast was helping Colossus fix his broken arm, but it was easier said than done because he needed a lot of force to set his bone back into position. She didn't remember what she did, but Magneto, who was also recovering next to her, told her that she killed Bastion all by herself. She was worried that the other X-Men might think she was dangerous now, but Magneto said that sometimes it's quite beneficial to be thought of as dangerous. Hope had another flashback to something that happened in the future when they were almost ambushed by a group of scavengers. Cable was almost shot and killed, and Hope was worried about losing him. She couldn't bear the thought of wandering the deserts in this future all by herself, but Cable comforted her and said that was not going to happen. She wasn't getting rid of him that easily. The next day, the X-Men buried their dead, and everyone attended Cable's funeral, but Cyclops couldn't bear to finish his speech and began to cry. Hope took the lead and said that her father, Nathan Christopher Summers, was born into battle, and his life was a war. All the time she knew him, he slept in 10-minute stretches, ate with his back to a wall, and never sat still long enough to become an easy target. She said that Cable got an honorable death for a soldier, and that nobody needed to cry for him. Storm visited Wolverine in his room, where he was mourning Nightcrawler's death by drinking lots of beer, but it's hard for someone who can't get drunk. She was disappointed in him for joining the X-Force, even though Cyclops took most of the blame for that. She knew that Wolverine joined willingly, but the X-Men don't kill, and Logan had a lot of blood on his hands. Logan talked to X-23 and told her she was out of the X-Force. He and Cyclops both convinced her to join because she was a valuable asset, but he wanted her to make her own decisions. She didn't know what to do or what she wanted and wanted someone to tell her, but Logan said that was a start. Next, he talked to Cyclops, who said that he had a lot of blood on his hands, and maybe Captain America and the other Avengers would knock on his door to arrest him if they ever found out what the X-Force did. But he would go to prison smiling, knowing that everything he did was for the survival of the mutant race, and he would gladly do it all over again. One evening, the mutants were gathered around a giant campfire, but Emma Frost saw something in the fire behind Hope. It was the Phoenix Force. She immediately ran to tell Cyclops what she saw, but he was watching something in the control room. Out of nowhere, the screen started to light up with hundreds of new mutant births all over the Earth. New mutants were being born again after all this time, and Cyclops said they were right all along.